Hey there, everyone. Wanted to thank you for joining us here on Saturday for the Pittsburgh Product Camp. I've got a lot to go over today with you, so I'm just going to jump right in there. I'll start sharing my screen here, and we will get going. All right, let me jump right in here and share with you. This is our sponsor, Sheets. They're sponsoring this session, and go visit them. You might need a cup of coffee after this one. Anyways, let's jump in real fast now. I've got a lot to go through at this point. And let's just jump in with why change management is so important to both UX design as well as business, and why change management has to be part of what we do. And it boils down to this. It boils down to the fact that every experience we have changes us. Every experience that we design changes others. And change is both inevitable and unavoidable. Now, there's a great model that we can leverage to help us do this. This is the Knoster Model. It was originally developed for people in the education sector to help students who are having trouble learning. And the goal of this model was that if you take a look at the 5 elements across the top there, if you're able to address all 5 of the elements with a student, you can get successful positive behavioral change out of that student. The other nice thing about the way this model is set up is that if you miss one of these pieces, you can identify by the reaction that you're getting from that student what part of your model is not really well fleshed out. Now, we can take that and leverage that for ourselves, and by adding in agreement, because I'm going to assume that most of us on this call are working in businesses, we have internal stakeholders as well as our end users that we need to get buy-in from. We needed something else in here. The other thing that's a little different about this version of the model than the original model is that it now groups together these elements into 2 categories. The first one being motivation. This is why are people going to get involved in an experience that's going to ask them to change. The second part of the model, the second group of elements fall into the category of activation, which is how do they make that change happen? How do we enable them to make that change happen? And just like the original version of the Knoster model, if we're missing one of these pieces of the puzzle, we can spot which parts we're having problems with. So if we're sensing from frustration from our end users or from our internal stakeholders, there's a good chance we haven't provided them with the resources that they need to get the thing done. But if we're hearing questions or feedback from them like, I don't understand, we've got a problem with the motivation, and in particular with the vision. What's nice about this is it prevents or keeps us from having to spend too much time on things that are working well, so we can put more of that effort on the things that aren't working well. So one of the problems with designing for change is that there's this other mostly universal truth about change, and that is that most people hate or fear or dislike change. One of the big reasons that they do, it boils down to uncertainty or the unknown. And what they're concerned with are these 6, what Professor B.J. Fogg from Stanford would refer to as the 6 ability factors. How much money will this cost? How long will this take? What do I need to know? How hard is it? Is this different from what I always do? Or who else is doing this? These are all factors that play into whether or not we're going to be willing to engage in a change. These become the barriers to change for us if we don't address them well. If we take a look at skydiving as an example for what gets changed, we have these 3 internal factors that can be changed during the course of any experience we have. There are biases, our beliefs, and our behaviors. Depending on the size and scope of the experience will determine the size and scope of how much these change. So for instance, if you've never gone skydiving before in your life, even though you've never done this, you come in with some preconceived notions, some expectations of what it's going to be like. Now, if you turn around and you enjoy yourself, then all of your behaviors, your biases, your beliefs, they're all going to shift to this positive side of things. And it doesn't matter how you felt when you began. You could have dreaded the idea of skydiving the first time, but if you feel the way this lady does, while skydiving, suddenly your entire attitude about it changes. Now you can come into skydiving totally excited to do it, but then jump out and feel like this guy, and everything goes to the negative side. Now, the thing is that when the opportunity to skydive comes up again, our previous beliefs, wherever they got shifted to, and behaviors and biases, they become our new baseline. So we have a baseline going in, we go through an experience, and that establishes our new baseline for the next time we have an experience. And this is what will either keep us engaged with the experience or get us to never go into that experience again. But again, I said that the size of the experience will determine how big the movement is in affecting these things. So even something as simple as using a light switch will change us. If you look at that light switch on the top, this is a pretty common one. It's usually found just inside the door. And as long as when we go into a dark room, we can reach in there and flip that switch, our biases and our beliefs about how a light switch should work get a little bit more reinforced. Now, if you step into a room and you reach for that top switch, but instead you're presented with that bottom switch, it challenges those beliefs and even your behaviors in this case. Now you've got to change how you think about light switches and how you interact with them. So this is, this happens with every single experience that we have. But now I got to try to catch up here a little bit. So let me jump real fast into the first category of elements from the Knoster model itself, the motivation. And the whole purpose of the motivation portion of the Knoster model is to build a desire for people to want to change. People are fine when change is something of their choice. They're not as fine when change is something that's being forced upon them. So we need to build that desire for them to want to change or to engage with the experience that we're creating, whether that's a digital product, physical product, or social policy, whatever it may be. We need to give people a reason to want to engage. So the picture here is of the Works Landroid, and this is a great thing for addressing the first element on the change model, which is the vision. And what this does, if we look closely at this and we think about it for a second, basically this is a Roomba for your yard. Yeah, just let that thing loose. It goes around your yard, it mows it for you, and you don't have to do anything. And this creates what Chip and Dan Heath in their book Switch would refer to as a destination postcard. You can see how good your life is going to be. You can see what the change by switching from a traditional mower to one of these will bring you. Now, if you don't have a strong vision, you can anticipate, or you should be on the lookout for signs of confusion. This is a clear indication that your vision is not clear to everybody. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to speed through this. I want to get us on track and get us done on time, so I'm going to get through these a little faster than I had intended. The next one is incentive. Now, if you've got a good vision, a lot of times that will just dovetail right into the incentive. People will immediately see what's in it for them to make the change. In the case of this Landroid, there's no need to go out to buy, to store, to pour, to clean up gasoline every time you want to use the mower. There's no noxious fumes from running the mower. There's not a lot of loud noise from the mower. It uses batteries, so it's a little more more environmentally friendly. There's all kind of incentive for this. And so while it's out doing the job, you can be kicking back and drinking your iced tea. Now, if you don't have strong incentives in the experience you're building, you can expect to see resistance from people. From your internal stakeholders, that could mean that they are not buying into the idea. And this may be a matter of the changes requiring them to change whatever metrics they're being measured on internally. So if you have to change internal processes, make sure that you give your internal teammates something new to be measured by, something that they can be rewarded on, because everybody is interested in what's in it for them. And if you're not getting adoption from your end users, clearly they're not keen on the incentives that you think are important. The last one in the motivation bucket is this one of agreement. Now, one of the signs that you don't have good agreement or alignment, first off, with your internal stakeholders or your coworkers, is that you get misalignment in work efforts. You got one team going off in one direction, another team go off in another direction. When they come back together, you realize that their two efforts don't align to one another. That's a sign that either the vision was perceived differently by each group, or the incentives were perceived different by each group. And similarly with your external stakeholders, your end users, you can see this in, this shows up in ways like people use your product or your service or whatever in a way you never intended. For instance, Twitter was originally designed as a way for people to communicate with one another, but it quickly morphed into being a news outlet. At a previous job I worked at, one of the products we sold was the Food Saver vacuum sealer. Marketing team originally positioned that to be a way to pre-make an entire week's worth of meals and save it all for easy, use during the week. But I think, what it turned out to be is most people just interpreted that as, I now have to blow my entire Saturday and Sunday making meals. And so we didn't move very many items. But then once it was figured out that a person could save up to $2,400 a year, and that was the incentive, suddenly they bought into it. But similarly, you can find people using it in a different way too, because they figured out their own vision for it, or they figured out their own incentive for it. So keep an eye out for those different uses, or like unintentional or intentional sabotage. Quickly moving on here to the activation side. This is how people get done. If we keep in mind those 6 ability factors that I brought up a few minutes ago, that's where these really start to come into play when it comes to executing on the idea. The whole goal of the activation phase is to help people reach their desired outcome. That's our entire job. This is where most of us spend a lot of our time, working through usability and information architecture and things like that. A lot of that will come into play throughout this section. Now, some of you may recognize the image on the left there from the iPod ads that they were running, that Apple ran all the way back in the early 2000s. I'm going to look at that because it's a great role model for how we can activate a big change. If you consider the fact that at the time, there were already plenty of MP3 players on the market, and Apple came and launched a brand new one that was 3 to 5 times more expensive. They had a lot of hurdles to overcome because that very first ability factor was being challenged. But Apple, before they even released, and for those of you that may be too young to even recognize this is the first gen iPod player here. But before they released this in October of 2001, they released iTunes, which is that icon right there to the left. iTunes came out in January of 2001. And so even before you got an iPod, you were able to go in and manage your music, organize it, create playlists, and get things set up the way you like. So once you got the iPod, it was real easy to just sync those two together, and you had music. But the other thing that Apple did in a quick follow-on there was to get together with the music industry, and they worked out deals with several music labels so that they could sell music for 99 cents a song. And so this made a lot more content available to people, and they didn't have to go to the stores now. So this all plays into having an action plan. Apple had their internal action plan to get all these ducks in a row. They shared this out, when they put this out to market, the action plan was visible to the end users. Get iTunes, get my music organized, connect this up, and I'm good. The second part of the activation is skills. People need to be able to get it done. I'm sorry, I glossed over real fast on this previous one. Let me jump back here real fast. One of the ways to tell if you don't have a strong action plan, or if people don't understand your action plan, is that they will start feeling fatigued. Internally, you'll see false starts on internal action, activities that you're trying to do. Externally, with your end users, you'll see them struggling to complete the task, like if they're not able to get the music onto the device, things like that. You'll start to sense fatigue. You'll hear it in comments that they make about, I don't think I'll ever get this done, kind of thing. And then with the skills side of the thing, it's similar. They'll feel anxiety if the skills aren't there. Now, for some things, the skill level can be really simple, like the light switch. Not a whole lot of lift in trying to upskill somebody to be able to use a different style of light switch. And in fact, the house I just moved into, literally every light switch in the house is different. So I no longer have any faith in what light switch I can expect in any room I ever go into. But if you sense any anxiety, if you hear people talking about, or you watch this in any of your usability studies where people are struggling, this is an indication that you're having problems with their skills. And this is an opportunity where through the UI or through the information architecture to help them achieve their goals. And then the last one, this may be the lowest of hanging fruits for all of this, is just resources. Imagine what the iPod would have been if Apple had never come out and given us iTunes and 99-cent in the music store, 99-cent songs. Now we have a device that's 3 to 5 times more expensive than all the others, and it's no easier to use. There's no advantage to it whatsoever. That would be extremely frustrating. And that's one of the signs that you're struggling, like people don't have the right resources. You can see this in some of your, if you listen to your customer logs at your call center, if people are calling in, hey, I don't know where to get this, or if you see it in your CSAT or NPS surveys where they're telling you they gave you a bad score because they couldn't locate somebody, whether the resource is really there or not, if they can't find it, it may as well not be there. So let me just bring this full loop real fast here. This is the Knoster model in its entirety. I'm going to skip past this, jump right by this quickly here and jump to a canvas that I've put together that can help you activate this model. What I've done here is just simply, again, group these things into the 2 categories that they fall into. We've got the same groups in here. We've got vision, incentive, and agreement under the motivation. And the one thing I've done here is we've given ourselves space to work and consider both our internal stakeholders and our external end users, and fill in these blanks with details about things. If we think about that Landroid, for instance, under the incentive are all those things that we talked about. For the end user, it could be about the environmentally friendly, low noise, no fumes from gas, and all those things. But from the business perspective, this might be a much higher profit margin type of product. But go through each of these categories and fill this out. And you can also use this for anything, even your own personal life. If there's anything you're trying to do, say you have to convince a spouse or significant other that you want to get a Harley, this could be one way you might be able to convince them if you put together a compelling enough canvas to explain why this would be good change for them. And the last thing I want to share with you, so we have some time for some Q&A here, is some resources. If you're interested in learning more about why people change, how they change, the things that get in the way of change, I recommend reading these 2 books. They played a large role in modifying the Knoster model from its original state to where it is now in the UX state. It will cover a lot of things. It will help you build out your the Knoster model, fill in those blanks, come up with a good vision of how things can do things. So that's, again, and I'm sorry I had to blow through this so fast, and I just want to leave you with this one parting idea, and that's really that as designers, as people creating products and services, as people that are doing the innovation, we have a responsibility and opportunity and even the privilege of trying to drive positive behavior change for others. And the Knoster model gives us a simple and concise way to make that happen. So thank you. If you want to reach out to me, you can see that I've got my email down there. Again, there's the Twitter handle and the hashtags. And there's also an article that I've got out on UX Boot that you can refer back to, since I did have to blow through this so fast. So if there are any questions, go ahead and drop them in on the side there, and I'll be happy to answer anything. So one of the, I'll start with, I see a question here from Rowit. Rowit asks, any ideas on switching doubters to change agents? Probably the single biggest thing is the incentive. Most of the time that you run into doubters, it's a lot of times they don't see what's in it for them. If you can address what's in it for them, if you can give them enough incentive, and sometimes this is about, so again, in business, every team within your organization is getting measured on something. And sometimes when we have to change internal processes to create new innovations for our end users, it can require internal stakeholders to have to change how they're measuring their own success. Don't leave them hanging. Find a way to say, hey, if we measure it this way, we'll still be able to, show how you're contributing to the overall success of this. So that's one way to create change from people that are doubters on things. How do you adjust the whole column for different personas, or do you tailor them for each? Sarah, that's a great question. Yes, you might have to tailor this for each. So consider how you might go to market. Now, we're living in an age where we do a lot of personalization through email marketing and things like that. When you try to position the incentives or the vision for different people, you're going to want to adjust the messaging going out so they buy in. Well, the same thing holds true for your internal stakeholders as well. Your engineers are probably going to need a slightly different pitch than the people in the marketing department, than the people in the procurement departments, whatever it is. Yeah, you will want to switch this up. But again, if you just keep applying this model and you look at those 6 elements, if you need them to change in some way, go through the same process. Keep in mind, the bigger the change you're asking for, the more in depth you've got to go through this. But you can use this template that I shared with you, the Canvas, as a tool for workshops too. So you don't have to do this alone. Do this in participation with your end users. Do this in participation with your internal stakeholders. I hope that answers your question. Let's see, Adam asks, I would be interested in any guidance or thoughts relating to application of these specific areas once one completes the Canvas and the framework. If I'm understanding your question right, I think you're asking, like, how do you apply this? In which case, it's going to work. You can use this as a tool for building out your communications with everybody, with, again, your internal and external stakeholders. I hope that answers your question. I think I understood it. Is that, give me a thumbs up if I got that one right for you. So there was a question that was in there a minute ago about at what stage would you do A/B testing? A/B testing is going to fall into your regular UX workflow, but it can inform, you might find that it informs some of your model. If you're not seeing the outcomes, you're running an A/B test and you notice that something is not performing as well as another, you might discover that what you've got there is a usability issue. It could be, again, they might not be finding the resource that they're looking for. So you can come back and look to see where that is. It could be that they're having trouble navigating, so the information architecture might be off to what they think it should be. So you have a skills issue there. There's a variety of places that you can do this, and that is another one of the nice things about this model, is that it fits so well alongside many of the practices that we already do right now with regards to empathy mapping. If you're already doing your empathy map, you can fill in a lot of the blanks from the end user side about what they're looking for. What are their pain points? Whatever you know what their pain points are, find those incentives to overcome the pain points. And same thing when you go and you do your work with your stakeholders. Find out how they're being measured so you can address any pain points they would have if you have to ask them to measure something differently. If there are no other questions, I just want to, again, thank you all for joining us here today, and go patronize the sponsors of the product camp. Without them, this wouldn't have happened. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Saturday.